Okay. So we're at the end of Yud Shvat, which is the 10th day in the month of Shvat. And I see Karen's just joined. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
So Yud Shvat is one of the biggest days in the Lubavitch Hasidic calendar because it's the day that the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, passed away on Yud Shvat. And it's also the day that a year later, Menachem Mendel became Rebbe. Hi, Suri, I see you there.
Was that just coincidental, the dates?
No, it's not coincidental. So the first Rebbe passed away, and really it took the Hasidim a year to convince he had two sons-in-law, he had two daughters. The previous Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak, he had two daughters, and each one had a very educated and potential Rebbe son-in-law. And there were some people who felt the elder daughter was married to someone, Rabbi Groner, I believe his name was Groner. And I think it was Groner, I'm not 100% sure. And they were thinking that maybe he would be the Rebbe. And the second daughter, the younger daughter, Chayamushka, was married to Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who did not want to be Rebbe at all, was not interested in being Rebbe. He had very interesting background. He went to the Sorbonne. He had degrees from Paris and from Berlin. He wore a white suit. He read the newspaper. He had a job at the Brooklyn Navy Yard and was not interested in being the new Rebbe. But over the course of the year, from when the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Frierdiker means previous, when the Frierdiker Rebbe had passed away, as the year went on, more and more people were putting pressure on Menachem Mendel to become Rebbe. And it actually caused a little bit of a issue in the family, because at a certain point it became clear that the Hasidim wanted the younger sister's husband, that was Menachem Mendel, to become the Rebbe and not the older sister's husband. And I'm not sure exactly how the deal got sealed. I wasn't actually looking up on it before the class, but basically when the Hasidim start singing certain nigunim, certain tunes, they kind of spoke, and basically the Hasidim chose Menachem Mendel to be the Rebbe, the next Rebbe. And then I guess the year later he conceded, and the way that the concession of accepting it's called accepting the Nesius, accepting the position, was that there was a certain teaching that the previous Rebbe would teach every year, Basi Lagani, and then on Yud Shvat, the Rebbe started to teach that extrapolations on Basi Lagani. So in a way, and I also think, I haven't looked at notes of this since way back, I think that's what happened, that the Rebbe started teaching Basi Lagani, and that was in a way acknowledging that he would become the Rebbe. So Yud Shvat is important for both those reasons. One reason, it's the Yort side of the previous Rebbe, and second reason, it's the anniversary of when, I would like to say, our Rebbe, because I consider myself a Lubavitcher, and it's when Menachem Mendel, my Rebbe, our Rebbe, became Rebbe. So it's a big day in Hasidic circles. And so tonight, in many, many communities, and last night, they had special events commemorating. So Sandra, I know you were listening to the event that was on Monday.
No, I went to the event, which was probably a mistake.
Not feeling well. I was thinking, did you join on Zoom or what? So
no, there was it was Karina was there. It was phenomenal. I mean, Karen, it was phenomenal. It was the most amazing thing. It was just obviously next to you, but I mean, it was just the woman that spoke that I sent you, she was just like when you're finished, when they were finished, they were like 3 women, and your answer, like the only thing you could say was, what else can I take on?
Right.
To facilitate Mashiach coming. Like, what else can I do? That's how moving.
Wow.
They had a phenomenal
I don't want to interrupt Sandra. It's perfect what she just said. She summarized it exactly right. The woman who was saying what she was saying, she was giving all this beautiful lecture upon how every single blessing and every single little extra thing we do, just add one little element to it. And Sandra said it correctly. And this is for Mashiach to come. And all the stories that she gave and everything that she gave over was so powerful. She had everybody, verklempt. Like everybody was rubbing their eyes and taking a sip of water. And she was just like amazing, just amazing. And that's what it was.
It was in New City. It was in New City. It was an event in New City. So I'm really happy that everybody, or not everyone, Sandra and Karen who were there, found it very inspiring. I'll just say a little bit about the Rebbe and Mashiach, because when we talk about Yud Shvat and we talk about the Rebbe's legacy and the Rebbe's commitment, his teaching, his mission, stories are told that from when the Rebbe was very, very young, he had a particular commitment to this idea of Mashiach. And I read an essay by one of the Shluchim, and the idea of Shluchim is also an invention of the Chabad Rebbeim, that starting with the previous Rebbe, he sent maybe just a handful of Shluchim. I know he sent some Shluchim to Australia. Shluchim means messengers, means people carrying on his message, his mission in other places. So the Frierdiker Rebbe sent a handful of Shluchim, and of course our Rebbe made it a sort of central aspect of his Nesius, his leadership, to cultivate Hasidim who could go out and start Chabad houses in all different places across the world. And that's really the amazing success of Chabad. They say wherever you can find Coca-Cola, you can find a Chabad house. So the Rebbe from a very young age was committed to this idea of Mashiach. So one of the Shluchim wrote a speech, and it was printed out and I read it, that after the war, basically it felt, and the atmosphere in the Jewish people and in America and maybe other communities that were survivor communities, was the way this Shaliach expressed it. It was kind of like a shiva, like you're sitting in a shiva hall, in a shiva house, because everybody's talking about the past, and everybody's talking about what was lost, and everybody's talking about their relatives that passed away, and people are totally in this, we almost got devastated and annihilated headspace. And the Rebbe came, and it was starting with the previous Rebbe who came to America and said those famous words, America is nicht anders, which means America is no different. If we had vibrant Yiddishkeit, Judaism in Europe, we can have it in America as well. And then the Rebbe came and brought, and the Rebbe came out, he was living in Berlin. He managed to get out, I think, the Frierdiker Rebbe got out, the Rebbe's mother got out, and they managed to come to America and reestablish a basis for a Torah community. And the Rebbe really, first his father-in-law and then him, injecting this new mission, instead of it only being, we lost, we were almost annihilated, we survived, but in mourning, it was, okay, what can we do to bring Mashiach? What can we do to transform the world? How can we get back on track to do the mission for which we were created as a nation, which is to bring light and the light of God consciousness into the world? And that Judaism is not just for us, it's for everyone. It's not just for the survivors. It's not just for the Orthodox. Judaism is for everyone. There's a message even for the non-Jews. There's a message for children, a message for men, women, a message for the police forces, a message for, prison in South Africa. That, there's a famous story that the day before Pesach, somebody in South Africa, Shaliach, gets a message that all the Jewish prisoners in a South African prison should get matzah on Pesach. And it's like 24 hours before Pesach. How can this possibly happen? But the Rebbe said it needs to happen. So this one calls this one. And in the middle of the night, the prison guard or the prison commander in South Africa receives a telephone call from New York, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, requesting that he make sure that the Jewish prisoners in the prisons in South Africa get shmur, not just matzah, but shmura matzah, which means handmade and all that. And this Afrikaans commander or commandant or whatever his position was, he's totally stunned. And he says, if a rabbi in New York cares so much for prisoners in my prisons here in South Africa, that really means something. And it happened. They got shmura matzah for Pesach. So the Rebbe touched, people across the board, Jewish, non-Jewish, of all ages. And there's some wonderful autobiographies of the Rebbe that are worth reading, I would say, for everyone. I would particularly recommend one written by Chaim Miller, who's a wonderful author. He actually is the editor of the Gutnik Chumash, and there's another Chumash that was given out. I don't think it's called the Living Torah. It's just called Torah. But Chaim Miller, he's an incredible author. So he wrote an autobiography about the Rebbe called Turning Judaism Outwards. And the whole idea of it is that Judaism has a message for everyone, Jewish, non-Jewish, that the principles of Judaism are universal as well as particular for Jews, but universal as well. And because of the Rebbe, we know the Rebbe instituted a moment of silence in all the public schools so that, they weren't allowed to have the idea of talking about prayer or God in public schools, but he introduced a moment of silence because the idea was that students should just have some time for reflection. And many stories. For example, there was a Black woman elected to office in Brooklyn, and I don't remember the exact position she got, but she was very upset. She was hoping to get a better position, a more impressive position, and she was put in charge of support, some kind of food distribution, something or other. I'm not sure what the portfolio was.
I was just going to say that. Shirley Chisholm, yes.
Yes. What was her position, Linda? Do you remember?
Congresswoman?
I think agriculture or something.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
She was Minister of Agriculture, and she was very upset. And she went to talk to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, there's so many people in your district who don't have enough food. And he kind of motivated her to start a whole program of, subsidized milk and food for her community, not the Jewish community. So many stories. I lived in Crown Heights for 8 years while the Rebbe was alive. And I'll just share one more story that somehow I always remember the story. That I had a friend who was working in the stamp business, and she used to have to travel all across the world to get stamps designed. That was part of her job. And I'm not sure, this didn't happen to her, but I was remembering people were traveling all around the world, and every time somebody went on a journey, they would go to the Rebbe and get a bracha, including myself. My parents lived in South Africa, and I used to go and see them when I had one baby and then two babies. And I think even till I had 3 babies, but once my little list was a toddler, it was too difficult, and my parents started coming to visit me. But I used to go every year, and before I would go to the Rebbe and tell him I'm traveling, and I would get a blessing and $1. And when I was in my 9th month of pregnancy, I would go to the Rebbe, get a blessing and $1 on my birthday, a blessing and $1 for all of my children's birthdays, a blessing and $1 before birth, a blessing and $1. So this person was going traveling, and I don't remember the names of the countries, but he was visiting a particular country in Africa. Let's say he was visiting, I don't know, Kenya. And the Rebbe gave him $1 and said, this is for your visit to, I don't know, Nairobi. And Nairobi's not in Kenya, correct? Correct?
Right, different.
Yeah, different. So he's like he thought to himself, I'm not, so maybe that's not a good example.
Nairobi is Kenya.
Yeah, maybe that's not exactly. Okay, so let's
We
say
can Google it and find out in about a minute.
He was going
that much.
He was going to Zimbabwe, let's say, and
Is the capital Kenya?
Yes, I'm sorry. So he was going to, let's say, Zimbabwe, and the Rebbe gives him $1 and says, this is for your visit to Nairobi. And the Rebbe's thinking, I mean, not the Rebbe, the Chassid is thinking, is the Rebbe making a mistake? Like, why? And then he says, and when you get to Nairobi, I want you to give this matzah, look for a Jew over there and give him this matzah. And Chassid's thinking, I'm very confused, but you don't question the Rebbe. He got on the plane, and sure enough, the plane had plane trouble, and it had to land out of schedule. Guess where? This place that the Rebbe told him. And then he's thinking, how am I going to find this Jew? This is ridiculous. But of course, when you a chassid of the Rebbe, you do what you're told. So he thought, all right, he'll walk through the town, and he'll, just hope that he'll bump into someone. So he's a chassid. He's wearing his black hat, and he's, Lubavitch kapota with the gartel and whatever. And he's walking through the streets, and sure enough, somebody finds him and says, this is just ridiculous. This is crazy. By the way, and I don't know if he had a name for him, or he just said a yid who's, needing this. So the Jewish man tells him, he says, this is crazy because I've been here, living here for X amount of years, 6 or 8 years, and I need to get married. And there's a lot of girls here who are not Jewish, and I've held myself from marrying any of them. But honestly speaking, in the last few months, I was thinking that who cares if I marry someone who's not Jewish at all? Who cares? And I started getting ready to ask this local girl to marry me. And just in the last week, I don't know, last night or the night before, I prayed to God and I said, if it matters to you that I marry a Jew or not, send me a sign.
Oh my God.
And now you're coming here and telling me that you have matzah especially for me. Or maybe the Rebbe even said, look for David or something. So it was for sure for him. And he said, I needed a sign, and you came with the sign. So the Rebbe was plugged in an astounding way to all kinds of things.
Wow.
The famous stories of generals from the Israeli army visiting the Rebbe, and the Rebbe talking to them about strategy. And how come when your army went, you didn't hide behind that hill, and when you went around, there was that tower, this and that. And they're like, how does the Rebbe know? He's never been to Israel. He knew in detail reality of what was going on in Israel on the ground, where there's trees, hills, where there's hiding places. Incredible. And there were doctors and scientists who would come and ask the Rebbe advice how to do surgeries, how to do different things. There's a famous story of someone who had done a maths thesis, a thick maths thesis, and he came and he showed it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe looked through the thesis, page. He's like, quickly. And then he says, it's excellent, but there's a mistake on page 24. You need to fix it. So the Rebbe, we learn about, when we learn about tzaddikim, we can share stories about the tzaddikim, and they're very inspiring to hear the stories about the tzaddikim. But what's really the part that's really inspiring is that each one of us can aspire to expand our consciousness, to have that consciousness be broader and broader and broader. And when we hear stories of the Rebbe, what it does is it doesn't just inspire us with the thought of, oh my gosh, the Rebbe was incredible. For me, it's always been what the Rebbe is what a person can accomplish, what a person can achieve, who allows themselves to expand exponentially and develop and evolve spiritually. And, the Rebbe obviously had a special neshama, but his humanness was very incredible. And so many stories of how he could be plugged in. So it says that a tzaddik can see from one end of the world to another, that's something that a tzaddik can do. So it was a great privilege to live in the neighborhood of the Rebbe, to be around, the stories and hear personal experiences from so many people. And I have my own story with the Rebbe, which I've told a lot of times, but I'm not sure if everybody in this call has heard it. I guess I can share it. It's brief. It's a brief story. Linda, you haven't heard it? Sandra, you haven't heard it?
I don't think so.
I don't remember.
Okay.
If you say it, I'll remember. If you...
So I came to study in Crown Heights, and the Rebbe used to meet people one-on-one, but by the time I came, he wasn't meeting people one-on-one. Hi, Cheryl, I see you. So the Rebbe wasn't meeting people one-on-one anymore, but he was meeting people in groups, and there were groups like women about to get married, men about to get married, bar mitzvah boys, people visiting from out of town. So my rabbi and my Rebbetzin came from South Africa to visit, and there was a call that the Rebbe was speaking to out-of-town visitors. And so my rabbi and my Rebbetzin said, I was with them, and they said, come, let's go. They called it a yachidus. It wasn't really yachidus anymore. Yachid means private audience, but it was about 60, 70, 80, 90 people, not so private, but not 3,000 or 5,000. And the Rebbe was talking about something, and then in those days, when he finished talking, he would give out a booklet or $1 or something. And I'm not sure if it was that time that he gave me something, or it was another time, but it was one of the first times that I had like a one-on-one encounter with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe looked into my eyes, and it was the most incredible experience that I've ever experienced, because I felt energy coming out of his eyes into my eyes. And the energy was like tangible, like the energy of a leaf blower blowing energy outwards. And it came from his eyes into my eyes, and it kind of blew right through me. And I don't know how long I'd been in Crown Heights. I don't know if I'd just arrived, if it was this moment when the Rabbi and Rebbetzin from South Africa came, or it was when I'm not even sure, but I know that I had come with a lot of questions and doubts about my connection to, I had already been keeping Shabbat, and I was already kosher, and I was already externally committed to practicing Yiddishkeit, but I had so many conflicts and so many different kind of resistances, and this energy came and it just blew right through me. It just and cleaned me out. And I just remember walking away from there feeling a little bit like a hollow tube, like just a hollow, like a toilet roll, like the inside of a paper roll, paper towel roll. And I just thought, okay, that's it.
And have you always felt that way since? Has that continued?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has continued. The kind of like angst, I had been sort of becoming religious since I was 13 or 14 years old. I was already 23 when this happened, 22. And this like kind of tormented, I don't know, something, it just like, it's not like yeah, something about that I consider a real blessing from the Rebbe.
Amazing.
And one other blessing from the Rebbe that I feel I mean, I have lots of stories, and it is Yud Shvat. We can't talk about all the stories, but before I had one of my children, before all of my births, I would go to the Rebbe to get a blessing for the delivery, for the labor in my 9th month. And after the Rebbe passed away, I went to the Rebbe's Ohel and got a blessing, or tried to, pray at the grave side of the Rebbe. And I had a very specific prayer in my heart. I had been reading about spiritual midwifery, and I was having my 4th child, and I prayed that I should have a very spiritual labor, and that I should be connected to Hashem in a very connected way while I'm giving birth. And I should appreciate the spiritual opportunity of the moment, something along those lines. And I'm sure I also asked for a safe birth and everything. And it was pretty intense, because when my daughter was born, Naomi Rivka, not Elisheva, she had Down syndrome, and they told me she had Down syndrome. And I don't know what, like a very weird thing happened in that I didn't get phased in the least from the entire, experience of her with her therapists and her doctors and everything. I was always like, this is meant to be. This is just exactly what Hashem wants. And it was funny because it wasn't me. I felt like it was really the Rebbe's bracha. I had asked for that specific thing, and in a way, that's the specific thing that I got.
Give me the chills. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's some story. Yeah.
So anyway, I guess we'll move on, because I told Michelle that this is a parsha class, so I don't
This is
have to.
wonderful, though. I
Yeah.
don't know a lot about the Rebbe, but I'm so fascinated. So I'm just glad that I learned a little bit today. I'm going to get that book you mentioned.
Yeah, so Turning Judaism Outwards, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and way to learn about the Rebbe, and also to learn about the breadth of his vision, which was just incredible. And also to come back to Sandra and Karina's point, which we started, is that the Rebbe wanted us all to be active participants in transforming the world. In transforming the world, which means that every single one of our actions makes a difference. Every single one of our actions can bring more light into the world, and we can be part of that process of bringing Mashiach, bringing the world to its perfection, bringing the world to its transformation. And that, when bad things happens, and a lot of crazy things are going on in the world right now, a lot of very strange things. I just want to read something that one of my friends sent to me, and I think it's really amazing. And this is from the Ruzhiner Rebbe, but this is a quote. It says, "At the end of days, before the coming of the Mashiach, Hashem shall take a string of faith, and stretch it around the world. Many a person will attempt to grab that string and to hang on to it. However, Hashem will appoint 2 angels to hold the string at both ends, instructing them to shake it violently as the days of the Mashiach come closer. It will become increasingly difficult to maintain a grasp on the string. And as the years go by, many, many will slip and fall. I'm telling you this, my brothers, so that those living at that time will know and take heed.
Wow.
So we're going through quite a shaking of the string. And I said to one of my friends, I said to her, you know, we just have to hold on and, you know, hold on tight. And she said, you don't have to hold on. You don't have to hold on tight. Just be in truth and choose life. So live in truth. Live in truth. And the truth of the Torah is do good. Sur meira va'aseh tov, do good, do mitzvot, be connected to the light, try and spread the light, and don't buy into all the sheker. Sheker is falsehood that's they're selling for great reduction of price, like 10 shekers for minimal pennies. People say, oh, wow, that's a real bargain, but it's not. Okay. So, okay, so that was about Yud Shvat. And okay, so
Beshallach, right? Or
sorry.
that last week. The Parshas Beshallach, or was that
Yes,
last
the
week?
Parshas Beshallach. I just feel like I like to read from the Hayom Yom, so I'll read a short
Whatever.
one. So today is now we Yud Aleph Shvat, the 11th of Shvat. So it says that the routine of our days begin with Modeh Ani, which is a prayer. I acknowledge before you, living and eternal King, Modeh Ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam, that you have given back to me my soul. And we say this every morning, even when the hands are not washed yet. And the reason is that all the impurities in the world do not actually defile a Jew's actual acknowledgement of their essence. He might lack one thing or another, but his modeh ani, and not just the thanking, but the ani part, I thank, the value of the I remains intact. So that's the message. That's from the Hayom Yom. So, okay. And now, as they say, without any further ado, so there's a lot of things in this week's Parsha. So this week's Parsha is that basically all the plagues are over. We had 10 plagues. And the 10 plagues had a dual purpose. The 10 plagues were to bring Pharaoh to a place of humility and submission, that he was this kind of symbol of ego and negative aspect of the I. I just said in Modeh Ani, we need to celebrate the holiness of the I, but Pharaoh was always celebrating and couldn't see past the greatness of his egotistical I. So the 10 plagues had a dual purpose, or even 3 purposes, to humble Pharaoh so that he should get past his thinking that he's a God and the all-powerful God, and that actually there's God above, something higher than him, but also as a chinuch project, education project for all of the Jews, that each of the plagues was an education for the Jews that God is in charge of, not just the water of the Nile, not just the animals, not just the air, right? An airborne virus goes through the air, the wild animals, the darkness coming from, up and beyond, even the energies, the angels and the higher power, the energies, because the 10th plague was the angel of death. God is the boss of all these levels of reality, and Egypt was a very sophisticated culture, but the culture was of putting power to all of those different entities. The Nile was a god, the frogs were a god, all the magicians had tremendous power in the culture, and astrology was a worship of the planets and the luminaries, and God has to come and say, I'm the boss of all those levels of creation, and I can change all those realities. So just to kind of go back a little bit, we said that Pharaoh says, who is God? I don't know God. Elokim, I know. But Havaya, the name of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke, I don't know. What's that name, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke? That's the name that God says, I am, I was, I will be. I am, I was, I will be. So last week we spoke a little bit about these different snakes. It was kind of complicated. And then Cheryl sent me another thing about the snakes. So I just want to go back a little bit very quickly about the snakes. So there's all these different snakes and reptiles, and the idea that Pharaoh is compared to a tannin, to a kind of a reptile. What is all of this got to do? So when Pharaoh says Elokim, the word Elokim is a name of God, has the same numerical value as the word Ha-Teva. I think it's 86. Ha-Teva means the nature. So God, if God follows nature and the sun rises when it's supposed to and sets when it's supposed to, so Pharaoh can maybe even understand that there is such a God in the world. But when Moshe encounters God at the burning bush, right there is a negation of nature. The bush is burning, it's on fire, but it's not burning. And then Moshe says to, this angel of God, or this representation of God talking to him, and he says, who should I say is sending me? And then Hashem speaking from the burning bush says, tell them I am that I am, I will be what I will be. Hove, hava, I was, I am, I will be, which means anything is possible. I can upturn everything. And that's what Pharaoh had a trouble with. So when we go to the different snakes, we said Pharaoh's snake was a snake with the head eating the tail. Everything is locked in a system. The system is a circle. Nothing changes. Pharaoh thinks he takes his place in a system, but the system is there's a God of this, a God of this, a God of this, but none of the gods really have real power to transcend. And then Moshe comes and he throws down his staff and it turns into a stick, and it says Moshe's stick is a long snake, which means that things evolve and change and can go beyond our wildest dreams. That's where we have to be now, that things are changing and things are going to be completely different to what we've known before. Can we get out of thinking that things have to be like this and be ready for a process and an evolution, and the fact that really we can change and the world can change? And in a way, the messianic dream and the messianic belief is that anything can happen and things can change, and we believe and hope that they're going to change for good and for positivity, and that goodness and kindness and light is going to triumph over darkness and evil. But now the string is shaking because all that garbage is coming up, as I've said many times, we're in a big detox. So all the garbage is coming up and we can just see it all laid out on the table. There's a lot of vomiting going on, excuse the horrible language, but that's what's happening. So we trust that through this process, there's a cleansing, and we're going to get to some place where God is going to reign and his values are going to be acknowledged, and the safety of Israel and the role of the Jewish people. It's not all going to be in this strange way that it is. So coming out of Egypt is all, a beautiful metaphor for all of this happening, because there we were in the dark grips of the Pharaoh mentality. Everything is the way we say it is, and you can't take a different approach. You can't think differently. This is how we do it. We throw the boys in the Nile. We don't like boys. We throw them. We come and send spies into your village, and we check. We make decrees. You have to obey. We decree, you listen. We don't believe in freedom. We believe in oppression and control and domination and blah, 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 blah. And then God says, my people are getting out. We break free. We are free. We're going to be free. So they come out. So after the 10th plague, and we said, and I don't know if we said, we maybe didn't say, but we could have said that in order to get out, the Jews had to slaughter a lamb, right, which was the idol worship of the Egyptians, one of their idols, because that was their astrology sign, Aries, and show their commitment, tie it to their bed for 3 or 4 days, tie it to the corner of their bed, and risk the wrath of the people saying, what the heck are you doing? And then they saying, well, we standing up for Judaism. This is what our God told us to do. And in 4 days' time, we're going to shecht it. And they, like, you had to choose sides, right? You had to choose sides. I mean, today people are scared to even say the word, I'm a patriot. I fly the American flag. You can, that's, you know, can you imagine not just flying the flag or singing the anthem or saying, I'm proud to be an American? People will spit at you in certain places if you say, I'm proud to be an American. It's like, what's the matter with you? So they take a lamb in front of everyone and they shecht it, or they don't shecht it right away. They hold it for 4 days for everybody to see what they're doing. And then not only do they shecht it, slaughter it, but then they have to publicize their position by putting a big flag outside their door saying, I stand with Moses. I stand with the Jewish people. I'm not part of the status quo. I'm not part of this, you know, narrative coming from the palace, this Pharaoh narrative. I'm in an alternative narrative. I'm risking my life, and I'm marking my lintels with blood, which means I did a bris milah. That's so barbaric. How could you do that? No, I did it. I did a bris milah, and I shechted the ram, which is the, you know, untouchable animal in Egypt, and I'm announcing it in public because I'm siding with God. So we know, who knows, out of every 5 Jews, who knows how many were brave enough to do this? Do we know?
One.
Let's say 5 out of 5. Yes, 5 out of 5.
No.
No,
No, I don't think so.
4 out of 5.
No.
3
Wait,
out
was
of
it-
5.
No, one. It had.
That's
Wasn't
it.
it 1 out of 5? Because
1.
no, that couldn't be, because it was, how many left Egypt? There was 1/5 or 4/5 of the population that
One.
left.
One.
So it was 1 out of 5 then, right?
1 out of 5. Talk about trauma in the DNA, like right from the beginning. Out of every 5 Jews, only 1 had faith in the mission, had faith in the program. And if you didn't have faith in the program, then you wouldn't have participated in the Korban Pesach, the Pesach offering. You wouldn't have done the bris. You wouldn't have gathered with your family. You wouldn't have put your belief system right out there for all to see. And I don't think any time in our modern history can we understand the story as well as now.
Right.
It's like really putting on your front lawn, you know, something like, you know. Well, I saw this great T-shirt that says, my pronouns are, I told you so. You know, that, or I identify as a
I love it.
conspiracy theorist or something crazy.
I love it.
I don't think there's any time in history when cancel culture has been so powerful. I don't think there's any time in history where people could lose their jobs in America for their belief.
my
What about the
God.
Red Scare? The Red Scare, McCarthy hearings in the 50s.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But that was sort of
People lost their careers. People lost their careers, whether they
Yeah.
really were or were not communists.
Oh, very
Right.
much so. They were
Okay, so
blackballed.
yes, so that happened in the 50s. So we can relate more now, maybe than since the 50s. And also this is happening now, not only in America, but it's happening everywhere. So it's very
Worldwide.
powerful now. We can really understand that to stand up for Moshe says,
Mhm.
this is what
What
we
about-
Jewish
what's it
people
called?
have to
What
do. And
about-
can you
what
imagine
about-
all the people saying, but they'll be very upset with us. They'll make our oppression even worse. They'll treat us even worse. And then Moshe is saying, that's what God told me. This is what we got to do. I'm sorry. And then people saying, no, my daughter has, got a great position coming up in a big Egyptian, amphitheater college that you can't risk. And then 4/5 didn't do it. I mean, it's very powerful. Okay.
Yeah.
So then the
I just
ones
wanted
who
to
did
add,
it,
you said people losing jobs for their belief system, but you totally forgot about all the Jews that came from Europe and lost their jobs because they wanted to keep Shabbos.
I'm not totally forgetting about that. I'm saying that we've had time when those were Jews who stood up for Shabbos, and that's wonderful.
Oh,
But now I'm
sorry.
talking about when people are being persecuted for having beliefs that are not in sync with powerful interests who have different beliefs. I'm saying we can relate to what happened in Egypt when the Jews were asked to take a lamb, slaughter it, and advertise it in front of everyone when the lamb was the official
The
untouchable
deity. Yeah, it was like the deity.
deity of Egypt. That's
Right.
one of the
I'm
deities.
sorry.
They had
I'm
many.
at work, so I guess I'm not like so.
No, that's okay.
Sorry.
So
I'll keep my
So
mouth
what
shut.
happened is the
Oh.
word, the parsha is called, Beshallach, because after the plague of the firstborn, Pharaoh can't take it anymore, and he says, go out. So actually, the name of the parsha, Beshallach, is Pharaoh sending them out, not allowing them to go, but literally sending them out. So that's where the name Beshallach came from. And it says Hashem didn't lead them on the way, a straightforward way, but he sent them on a roundabout way because he didn't want the people to change their
To run
mind.
back.
Easy access to go home. So he took them all the way. And then there's a whole story with the fact that Moshe took Joseph's bones with him when he went out. And Joseph had actually told the Bnei Israel that when you are going to be redeemed, please take my bones with you. So there's a good question that is asked. When Yaakov died, he said to Joseph, please take my bones, my body, and take it to the Ma'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron, and ask, go bury me out of Egypt. But Joseph didn't say that. Joseph said, when you will be redeemed from here, please take my bones and bury them. He actually said, take them to Shechem and bury them in Shechem. So now I have 3 questions for you. Number 1, why did Joseph not ask them to take his bones out right away? Number 2, why did he say, when you will be redeemed, take them out? It's kind of the same as question number 1. And question number 3 is, why to Shechem?
Oh, wait a minute. Wasn't she buried?
Shechem is a place.
Right, no, she was buried in. Wasn't she buried?
His mother,
Rachel?
mother Rachel?
Yeah, was that?
No, she was
reference?
buried on the road near Beshallach.
Oh, right.
She's very near,
Okay.
near.
What happened in
Right.
Shechem? What happened in Shechem?
Oh, Dina.
That happened in Shechem, but what else happened in Shechem?
I forget.
In Joseph's life, what happened in Shechem?
You worked for love on there? No, that wasn't.
Is
no.
that
Oh,
brothers?
no, that was
in
the
the
place
pit?
where he slept and he put the stones, right?
That's Yaakov.
Oh, wrong part. Oh God, I'm
Is
sorry.
that
I'm
where
not
his
guessing anymore
brothers
tonight.
threw him in a pit?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
you're right. Mhm.
Okay, so Yosef went to Shechem, even though he knew his brothers hated him, and his brothers, and then also we learn from a midrash that when it was time for Yosef and all the family to go bury Yaakov, he took them right past that pit, and they all got nervous. Now he's going to have his revenge on us. And he says, no, actually, I just want to pray to God here to thank him because he did a great miracle. And because I was sent to Egypt, I was able to save you all and all that good things. But now he says, I want you to actually bury me right near where I was stolen. In other words, return a lost object to where it's from. I was sent and thrown into a pit and sold from Shechem. And I should, I want to come back there, and it's like returning an object. Once you've taken something, put it back where it belongs. Also, interesting enough, Yosef feels like he has good muzzle in Shechem, even though that's why he went there in the beginning, because he felt he would be protected. But in fact, he wasn't protected. So now he wants to go back there, because this is getting a little complicated. Maybe I'll skip. But in the future, the people, the country, the nation of Israel will be, the land will be distributed, and he wants to be back in that place so that he can sort of advocate for his descendants. But we'll skip that for now. Anyway, so Moshe takes the bones of Yosef with him. And the reason why he didn't ask his children to take his bones right away is he wanted them to believe in their redemption. That when you will be redeemed, then take my bones. I believe so much that you will be redeemed. When you will be redeemed, take my bones. Not now, when you will be redeemed. And that inspiration, that confidence that Yosef bestowed on the people, don't worry, you're going through a hard time, but you will be redeemed. I'm so convinced of that I'm giving, I'm telling you that that's when you should take my bones, not now. So then we know about the journeying, that they guided with a pillar of cloud to show them the way, and at night that pillar changes to a pillar of fire, which is all beautiful things to learn about, that they were guided with these pillars of clouds, protecting them from scorpions and snakes underneath them, and a cloud at night, a pillar giving them direction and knowing where they should travel. And then they do various camps. And then what happens? They close to the sea. They're right there by the Yam Suf, by the Red Sea, and Pharaoh suddenly kind of has a change of heart. How come I let my whole labor force leave? And you would think like this is an insanity, because Paro has lost everything. The country's been decimated. It's been destroyed. Let the Jews go and get on with your life, rebuild your country. But he has some insane thing that he has to go back on his word and catch them and try to get them to come back and be his captive labor force all over again. And thus we have the famous story of the crossing of the Red Sea, and how at the banks of the sea, there's so much indecision. What should they do? Should they pray? Should they fight and turn around and fight Paro? What should they do? And Moshe actually starts praying to God, what should we do? And Hashem says to him, this is not a time to pray.
Right.
Don't pray now. Just, you got to stay with the mission. Just kind of go ahead. And it seems like it's an impossible thing. There's sea in front of them. And we know that there's a big discussion who jumps into the sea first, which tribe. leads the way, but we know Nachshon ben Aminadab jumps
Aminadab,
into the water and walks into the water till the water is literally up to his nostrils, convinced that if this is what Hashem wants them to do, somehow it will open for them, and it does. The sea separates, and the teachers, the Kabbalistic teachers tell us that when God created the world way back in, Sefer Bereshis in Genesis, he made a deal when he first created the ocean that when it would come time that the Jews would be leaving Egypt, the ocean would split. And then now the ocean says, but you only said if they deserve it, and they don't. They're not very holy. And then Hashem says, well, forget that I said that. Just split anyway. Just do what you're told. And there's an interesting midrash of this conversation between the sea and God, because apparently the deal was if they were worthy. I can't imagine people who risked putting their sign of the blood, and they did the Korban Pesach. I would think that would earn them enough points to get anywhere. But the sea, upon being pressured by Hashem, the sea does in fact agree to keep its original commitment, and it splits. And we know, there's so many things to say about the splitting, that it split into 12 paths, so each tribe went down its own path, and that it split so miraculously that the ground at the bottom of where they were walking was dry, not even muddy, and a lot of things to say about that splitting. And of course, Pharaoh chases them all the way into this passage through the sea, and when the Jews get through, and it's just Egyptians in this miraculous pathway, and the pathway was maintained by wind kind of holding up the sea on each side, almost like, it says, like glass panels almost, that when the Jews get to the other side, that wind stops and then the water kind of comes back, and Pharaoh and his whole army are decimated and caught in the water, and they all drown. And miraculously, Pharaoh doesn't. This is an interesting midrash, that Pharaoh himself survives, and he goes off and becomes the leader of Nineveh. And then we have the story of Yonah and the whale convincing the people of Nineveh to do tshuva, and that in fact is Pharaoh in his next job description, that Pharaoh is over. The whole story in Egypt, that's over, but then he somehow has another what's it another
purpose, another job. You're telling that he was Yonah? No, he wasn't.
No, that he was the king of Nineveh, so that when that's another story, when Yonah comes and says to the people of Nineveh, if you don't do tshuva, God will destroy you. Pharaoh says,
Pharaoh says, trust me.
Yeah, you better do it. You better do it. That's why Yonah didn't want to go to them, because he knew that they weren't friends of
him,
people, and if they did tshuva, they would cause us problems later on down in history. And Hashem says, that's not your problem. I told you to go tell them to do tshuva. But anyway, so the Jews, meantime, are very busy gathering. The chariots of Pharaoh didn't just come with soldiers and chariots. For some reason, they came with a lot of gold and silver and jewels. And I don't know, their chariots were very full of all this stuff. I don't even know why. Maybe they decorated the chariots. So when they were caught in the water washed up the chariots with a lot of wealth, and the Jews were collecting a lot of wealth at the banks of that water, and they got a lot of wealth through that. So much so that Moshe had to say, stop, it's enough, let's go. We got to move on. So he pursues them, and they get caught in the crossing of the Red Sea, and they get annihilated, really. And the Jews are collecting this great wealth. And then the next thing that's of significance in this week's parsha, because we're already close to 9 o'clock, well, we actually are at 9 o'clock, is the story of the Mann. So we have this very dramatic story of the crossing of the Red Sea, which has a lot of spiritual revelations as well, that when, I'll just say this briefly, when the sea opens and split, this we talk about a lot when we, on the 7th night of Pesach, because it took them 7 days. From, you know, the first night of Pesach is when they got out of Egypt, and then the crossing of the Red Sea is the 7th night of Pesach. We always talk about the great revelation that happened, because when you think about the sea covering the ocean bed and then the sea separates, that's a metaphor for tremendous revelation. What's usually covered becomes revealed. And so that night it says even the maidservant, even a simple person, had unbelievable revelations of God's revelation, because the splitting of the sea, God manifesting himself in a very tangible way, even more than the plague. So there's a lot to be said about that mystically. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and then I'll open for questions, is the manna, the Mann. So from the time that they get out of Egypt until the time that they are crossing into Israel, 40 years, they get the Mann, manna from heaven. So I don't know what's just happened here. Let's just bring my big screen back. They get no, I don't, somebody's calling me. I don't want to talk to her now. So I just want to, I'll run through a few points very quickly. We could talk about all of these for a long time, but I want to just tell you the quick things, and then we can talk about them more another time. So the Mann fell every day for 40 years, from the Exodus until they conquered Israel. It was an edible substance falling from the sky, and it looked like coriander seeds, or it had the shape or the size, actually, the size of a coriander seed. So I found a picture of a coriander seed.
They're little circles.
A picture of a coriander seed. Where's my coriander seed? There.
Small.
These are coriander seeds.
Oh, wow.
Circles.
Yeah, they're like little chickpeas. They look kind of like little
Yeah, but they're
chickpeas.
tiny. They're like that big.
Oh, so this is very, very magnified.
I think
Uh-huh.
so.
So yeah, so
Yeah, if you like, look at this person's hand.
yeah, well, there was I
can't remember
looked at, there was something in a bowl, but I don't know how
So look
big
in the
that bowl
jar.
is.
See the jar?
Yeah, that's very small. Okay.
Mhm.
So for some reason, yeah, so it's very small. So I don't know, maybe it fell in clumps because it was the color of white crystal. Each person would get an amount, and I have 43 ounces. So even though it was tiny like that, they would each get 43 ounces worth, each person. There was a lot of amazing things about the Mann, that to keep it clean, before it would fall, there would be a north wind which would sweep the ground, and then rain would wash the ground, and then the ground would be covered with a layer of dew, and then this coriander seed would fall, and then there would be another layer of dew, so it kind of got packed into between these layers of dew. And you've all heard before, it could taste of anything that you could imagine, but it did have a certain kind of taste. It tasted similar to something fried in oil and honey. And the midrashim that say that it had a beautiful odor, and when it fell, I don't know if this, what to say about this, together with precious jewels. I don't know, that's a midrash. I'm not sure what to do with that. That you could, and here are a few things that are interesting. You had to gather it by the first quarter of the day. If you hadn't gathered it by the first quarter of the day, it would melt and it would be too late. Number one. Number two, depending on how righteous you were and how in sync you were with God's will and way of him wanting you to behave, the Mann would either fall right outside your door of your tent or in the camp, or you had to go outside of the camp to find it. So if you're very righteous, it was sort of easy right there. Not more of a middle level of righteousness, you'd go look around the camp and find your portion. And if you were really off track and needed to do serious rebooting of your, realignment with your true self, you would have to go far away to get your portion. And also the way it was individuated. It was fully ready to eat if you were very righteous, like bread just out of the oven. If you were middle size, it needed to be cooked, but it was ready to cook, so to speak. And if you were not righteous at all, needing this adjustment, get back on track message, you had to still grind it in a mill. It came unrefined. It came very much unprocessed. So that's pretty amazing. So every day you were getting feedback from God, really, where you're holding. Do you need to fix yourself? Are you on track? So that was one thing that you got every day from God. And another thing that you got every day from God was a message in how to have faith in God. Because if you try to take double to keep some for the next day, what would happen to it?
It would spoil.
It would go moldy, get worms. You could not take for the next day. You had to trust that the next day you would get what you needed. Except on which day could you take double?
Shabbos, Friday morning.
Except on Erev Shabbos. Before Shabbos, everyone got a double portion because on Shabbat, they wouldn't be able to gather. So also it says that when the Mann melted, if they hadn't collected it, it would go in rivulets and the animals would drink it. And then if animals were sort of wandering around, other nations who caught or trapped or ate flesh from those animals would get a sense of the Mann. And the one last thing, it could taste pretty much, it had some capacity that you could imagine it tasting like anything you wanted, but there were a few foods that it wouldn't taste like. And this was out of consideration to the lactating mothers. Apparently, these foods are not good for moms nursing. They cause gas. So you couldn't, even if you wanted it to, you couldn't get to taste like zucchini, watermelon, leeks, onions, or garlic. And so the Jewish people at a certain point were complaining that they were missing the leeks and their garlic and their onions. I'm not sure about the watermelon or the zucchini, but they definitely complained. You would think that they would, not complain, but we know that people like to complain. They'll find anything to complain about. So you could have it taste like pretty much anything, but not those things. So, oops, they were complaining. So anyway, so I don't know if there's any questions or comments, because that's all I have from me in terms of what I had prepared, but I'm happy to hear comments or questions or anything that you would like to share.
How did they know which was their portion if they had to go out to the, either into the main area of the camp, let's say, or then further out? That's
very good question. They would have to walk towards the camp, but it would still be the closest one portion that they would come
to that tribe
to, but that is a good question, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they have the names printed on it,
little name tags. Cheryl, you had a question.
Yeah, do you think the Mann is connected to the Torah breakfast, that everyone was supposed to have a piece of bread for breakfast, or what's that called?
Pas lechem. There's an idea of a piece of bread a day to keep you strong.
Yeah,
I think that's the Rambam. I don't know. I'm not sure. But the idea of Mann is connected, because even the word Mann connected to faith, emunah. The word emunah, faith, has Mann in it. So I know it's connected to how we feel about our physical income, and we need to trust that we'll get what we need. We'll get what's,
Our daily bread.
yeah, our daily bread. Any other questions, comments? Michelle, any questions? You were listening very quietly and attentively. Any questions?
It's just fascinating. That was the next Torah portion after what we did last week with the plagues.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the plagues are over, and now we on this journey. And for the Jews, it's going to be quite a treacherous journey through the desert, facing lots of challenges and being guided by Moshe and having the clouds protecting them, which is why we have the holiday of Sukkot and the pillar of light, and then all their vicissitudes and challenges and mistakes and all the things that happened to them. That's where we're going now in the story. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you have a good night. And the idea, I guess, also is to always remember that these stories are not just history stories, that somehow we're supposed to be living with the times, the Torah times, and internalizing them to whatever extent we can, these stories. And there's a Moshe within us, there's a Pharaoh within us, there's our parallels to our lives, that these stories are supposed to be giving us inspiration and illumination, that somehow we see reality through the prism of these stories. They're not just stories, they're meant to be instructive in some way. But one thing, Jews do complain.
Yes, we do.
They do irritate their parent, because their parent, as in guardian and parent, get a little tired of the irritations, but they do a lot of complaining. So it's not necessarily the best takeaway, though.
Before you go, could I ask you a question about the book? There's another book about Rebbe by Joseph Telushkin. Do you know that one?
Yes, I read it. The Chaim Miller one is infinitely better.
Okay, great.
Infinitely. I read that one, and there's another one by Adin Steinsaltz, and I read that one too, but the Chaim Miller one is unbelievable.
That's the one.
Also
Okay.
Inside the Rebbe's Army.
Bracha, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Bracha.
You're welcome. Sorry, Sandra, there was
Bracha, how about Inside the Rebbe's Army by Sue Fishkoff?
So I don't know. I'm not familiar with that, but I know
that was.
Yeah, I mean, so many.
I've heard her speak also.
Yeah, you could read a lot of books on the